Okay, welcome back to episode, I've lost track of whatever episode, it might be 15 or 14, of Compassion Check-In. Our opportunity to pause and connect back to the heart in the middle of the week. So Compassion Check-In happening middle hour, midday, at the middle of the week on a Wednesday. So it's really just so good to see you all here. My friends, we're not going to go through the long introductions of your titles, but let's just say our names, just so that people get to know our names. Right at the top, let's start off with Alexandra, if you want to wave and say your name.
Hi, I'm Alexandra.
Welcome. And next up on my picture is Iris K. Do you want to say a quick hello and wave?
Hello, Iris here.
And wonderful. Next on my picture is Iris G.
Hello, it is again, and it's not deja vu.
Wonderful. And next up on my picture is Mia. Do you want to just wave and just say your name? Ah, Mia. You're yeah. Hello.
Mia's here, wave.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Mia. And next up on my picture is, you want to just say a hello? Somebody's got noise going on in the background. You might need to put yourself on mute. But Frank, if you just want to say a quick hello and wave.
Hi everyone, Frank Monroe.
Excellent. Next up, Danny, do you want to say hello and wave?
Hi, Danny Silvestri. Yeah.
Excellent. And Marvel, welcome back. Do you want to say a quick hello with the new hairdo?
Hi guys, it's Marvel.
Excellent. Welcome. And next in my picture is Rob. Do you want to say hello and wave?
Hi everyone, Rob.
Excellent. Maya's next in my picture.
Hi there, Maya here.
And Kojo, welcome back for the second time. If you want to just wave. Fantastic. And his library. I know he's the books, like Rob,
hello.
The library. And my friend Sergio, welcome here to the first time. Sergio, do you want to just wave and just say hello? We are recording and welcome to Compassion Check-In. So Sergio, here we are with a room full of friends. Everyone's going to make you feel welcome. And Compassion Check-In is just our opportunity to pause and breathe in the middle of the week. And our theme this week, am I right that our theme is courage? Our theme is courage. Actually, Sergio, I'm just going to put you on the spot. Can I just ask you, Sergio, the word courage, to kick us off, what does the word courage mean to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And for people who don't know, Sergio, you're conductor, you're a creative artist. And I hope you don't mind being put on the spot, Sergio, because I'd love to hear your initial thoughts on that. If you want to unmute yourself and then kick us off.
Rash, just before you do that, we didn't actually say hello to Maya.
Oh, Maya. Maya, I'm so sorry.
Hi. I think you did.
We did. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. And Sergio, over to you. If you want to unmute yourself, or I can click unmute for. Oh, there we go.
Oh, hello. Yes. Well, my name is Sergio. For me, the first thing about courage is about being yourself. Honesty, being able to speak your truth, no matter what. And that was, for me, is a starting point. Sometimes we neglect ourselves or what other people's expectations are about who we are. And sometimes, it takes a bit of courage to be oneself.
I love that. Sergio, I'm so glad I came to you first initially. My instinct was that thing about that courage, to be oneself and to speak one's truth no matter what. That's hard. That can be tough, isn't it? Because sometimes there can be all sorts of external factors. I mean, that's a really powerful start, that courage to be oneself, because we often, don't we? We think about courage, we think about bravery and achieving this and achieving that. Dr. Martin, do you want to say just a wave? We're just saying our first names today, but do you want to just wave to your fans?
Mute.
Good afternoon, every one of you. Always great to see these faces.
Yeah, well, Sergio was just kicked us off on courage. Anyone want to take the baton there? Or maybe I should just throw the ball to Rob. But Rob, you're always talking about throwing the ball. So I'm going to throw the ball to you. And then you choose who you're going to throw the ball to next on courage.
On courage, yeah, okay. I jotted some stuff down. It's doing it anyway. It's going with our heart. It's the heart's uniform, the wardrobe of the heart. It's a faithful journey, press-ups for our faith. It's the gymnasium where faith gets exercise. It's exercising our faith. That's what I scribbled down, and I'm going to throw the ball in the direction of Frank Monroe.
Thanks, Rob. I'll return the favour.
You're welcome, my brother. You're welcome.
Okay. Hi, everyone. For me, courage is about doing the right thing, regardless of the consequences, and moving outside of your comfort zone, because sometimes you have the head and heart argument, and it's about weighing up weighing up the possible outcomes, but for the better good,
Wow, love it. I mean, I'm loving it. Just before you throw the ball, you lot aren't playing today, are you? You lot on this call, you're not playing around. You are on the money. I'm like, okay, I'm not needed here. I'm just going to leave you all just this is great. I'm loving it. Rich stuff. And Frank, who are you throwing the ball to?
I'm throwing it to Sister Mavelle.
So who's playing with a pen that's leaking ink all over the place? So excuse me. I would agree with everything that's been said, and courage is the ability to kind of be yourself in every situation and to dare to be different. You know, because we're at a time where groupthink and uniformity is respected, and what's expected of us sometimes. I think courage is daring to be different and to stand up for what you believe in, even when no one else supports that.
Who are you going to throw the ball to? And hopefully you can see everyone's name in their square.
I'm going to throw it to someone in my square, and that's Iris G. You're on mute, Iris.
Okay, I think that actually I will just second what everybody said. Just before I came to this call, I was having a shower, and then I was thinking about the topic, and I said, well, is courage and bravery the same thing? And I think that I see courage like that. But courage for me is like, be able to be coward sometimes. It's just like, assume that actually, you don't have courage enough to do some things. And that in itself for me is courage.
It's wonderful. It's just before you throw the ball, you talked about that thing about is courage and bravery the same thing. You suddenly reminded me of something, because at some point last year I was thinking about this thing, courage and bravery, and what jumped out for me was that courage, bravery, I tend to link to an act, a physical act of being brave. It might be something that's happening to me. I'm going to war. Something there's something happening to me physically. Whatever. There's a bravery. I've been brave. There's a physical dimension to it. But courage, as many people have already touched on, often there can be the emotion, the psychological, the spiritual. That courage of being who one is. It can be often an internal thing. It can be really an internal thing of even being courageous in one's own connection to oneself, and then how we then step out into the world. So I love the fact that you also threw the word bravery into the mix there. Iris, who would you like to throw the ball to?
I think that I'm going to throw the ball to Maya.
Hiya. I think everything resonates with me that people have said. I would also reference the word boldness, and just to keep courage to me is to keep showing up for yourself in whichever situation you find yourself in. So connecting with that truth, and I think also pushing your own boundaries to a degree. So finding where that resistance is within, whatever it may be, and challenging yourself on that.
I love that. Love all of that. That keeps showing up. I like that. For me, there's something about, it's not necessarily directly linked, but I think there's something about the people who I admire. There's something about their consistency and the fact that they show up. I can, if I was to, as a coach, and sometimes I'm a coach and as a mentor sometimes, one of the conversations I have with some people then ends up being about how one is showing up, and the courage to, and the application to constantly show up and to show up consistently. I think that's very powerful in that mix. So that really does, that element of that really does resonate with me. Maya, who would you like to throw the ball to we've not heard from so far today?
Could I throw the ball to Alexandra, please?
Alexandra.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is what also resonates with me, this continuity, like courage to continue, even like in small deeds, just like continue getting out of bed, you know, continue calling your friends or answering the phone when they call, you know, just not giving up. Like courage is, yeah, not often on, doesn't have to be always something like really amazing and extraordinary, like great. It's just small steps. Yeah, giving yourself permission to pause to breathe or to attend a compassion check-in. It's a courage because there's so many things we have to do and we feel responsible for, but being continuously responsible to your own rhythm or being vulnerable enough to acknowledge that and just like to take breaks. I think it's a courage because especially for me, I don't do that very often. So it's like, it's kind of selfish, and it's courage to intervene or interrupt this stream of just doing things for others and what I'm supposed to do. So being continuously aware what your needs are and just doing it like or leaving the place or space when you need to do it, but continuously being aware of your own needs and yeah, that's important for me.
I love that. I really love that. I think it's magic. I love that very small everyday thing of courage, the courage to get out of bed just to do this or to allow to do once. It's huge. And for many people, we know it is really, really huge. And my mind went to a couple of people I can think of who have got some very considerable kind of health and other challenges. And that courage is really huge. And I love that thing about to continually kind of to check in with oneself. Love that. Who would you like to throw the ball to if we haven't heard from so far?
Danny.
Danny, over to you.
Yeah, I think what Iris G was touching on with it being quite like bravery is quite interesting because I liken the aspect of courage to be almost like my anxiety. It can throw in a similar feeling for me. So it's amazing how different it can be for everybody. And I think that's what I was going to touch on was just that courage is different for every one of us. You know, what is quite courageous for me might be very different to somebody else, and vice versa. So it's about showing up for yourself, which I think somebody touched on. And that for me, it's the case that if I don't practice being courageous, then I end up losing it, end up feeling less courageous later down the line. And that's actually quite scary because you've got to really practice these feelings in order to keep them going. And then like the compound effect of anxiety, if we get into that, you keep on getting more anxious, you're going to feel more anxious. So you keep on being courageous, you're going to feel more courageous, but we don't get taught that side as much, I don't feel.
It's a really beautiful point, that, isn't it? That thing, again, pick up on the courage and that bravery, but that thing, it needs to be practiced. And how sometimes with all these things, or when we're aware it's in that room, that there can be that anxiety. But if we don't practice it, then it kind of can shrink and shrink and so on. But if I practice it more and being encouraged, this is an interesting, I'm so glad you said that, because then encourage. I've been having some conversations with people recently about then the link between courage, and people don't often think about the relationship to word courage and encourage. So your last point there is a very, very powerful point in that. When I am encouraged, when I see somebody who's a teacher or whatever, a student, a parent, and I encourage them, courage, not just competence flourishes, courage, competence, all sorts of things emerges from that. To encourage is quite powerful, because to encourage is to empower. Danny, who would you like to throw the ball to? I think there's a few people we haven't heard from. We haven't heard from Kojo, we haven't heard from Mia, and we haven't heard from Iris Kate or Dr. Martin, I believe.
I don't know who Coach is, so let's chuck it to him.
Kojo. So Kojo, oh yeah, so Kojo, yeah, Kojo actually, and you're there with your braces at the moment, and you're here at Bonte, of course. So tell me, and I know Kojo, how would you like to be known to your soon-to-be fans? And feel free to take yourself off of, yeah, you're here. Good, we can see.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. I'm fine. Call me Kojo, call me Bonte, however you want to call me. I'm good. I'm very, very good. I like what Sergio is it Sergio, the gentleman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Courage is is different for everybody. I define courage as
Danny was saying that. Yeah, courage.
Danny, that's great. Danny was saying that. Courage for me is doing it regardless. courage for me is, in spite of all the realities and everything that looks so real, still get on with it and do it. Courage is standing in front of the pressure and the pain and every excuse, accept the excuse and still doing it regardless. And that is how I define courage. It's about execution. It's about the doing of the act in spite of anything that confronts an individual. So that's how I define courage.
Wonderful, magical. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. By the way, can I just ask, because you know I like putting people on the spot, with your radio station, which is soon going to be launched,
right?
Am I right? Do you want to just take the moment to give yourself an ad here? I mean, feel free to if you want to. I'm happy to just give you the space to. And yeah, do you want to just give an ad? Why not?
Rash, thank you. Thank you, Rash. We'll be launching a radio station in Harrow and Wilston called Fantastic Radio on the 20th of November. It's going to be online, and it's going to go on satellite by the end of 2021. But we're going to start on the 20th of November from Harrow Wilston.
And in a sentence, what's the purpose of this station?
We want to use radio to do three things: to educate, empower, and entertain. So use music very much as a conduit to bring people to a place of realizing their own potential and creating a home of people's possibilities.
Wonderful. And you're going to be last question before you throw the ball to somebody else. Are you going to be running a show yourself, because you've got the perfect voice for radio also?
Yes, I would do a couple of shows over the weekends, because during the week I'll be full on with the administration and the marketing, but over the weekends I'll be doing a couple of jazz shows and a few personal development shows.
Well, I'm sure there are a number of people on this call who will be wonderful guests for you also, who you're connecting with now. Who would you like to throw the ball to?
I will throw the ball to the next person who hasn't said a word.
Who is, now the people who have, to my memory, Mia, Iris K, and Dr. Martin.
Let's do Dr. Martin.
Dr. Martin Patrick, courage.
Okay. To me, courage means to ask more of myself and to meet those expectations. You know, I think asking more of yourself, it really helps to build your confidence, it helps to build your communications, it helps to give you a really great sense of your own potential. Courage is about understanding yourself. There's understanding your limitations, and then there's understanding your potential. And when you understand your potential, and particularly when you are raised in the way that I was, and that is speak when you're spoken to, then you have a sense of defiance that, you know, no, I'm going to say it now. I want to speak and I'm going to speak right now. So to me, courage really does mean asking more of yourself and meeting those expectations, because it really builds your character, and it helps you in so many ways in life, in business, in all sorts of things. But I think before you do all the business things and so on, you must truly have respect for your own being, because when you have that, it enables you to go forth and do so many things that you just didn't think you were capable of doing.
Wonderful. You know, Dr. Martin, what this lovely thing, I love that bit when you bring that courage and then one's potential. So I like that, you know, both being aware of what we feel the limitations, but the potential. So it gives me that room almost to begin to explore, oh, where might be that room for me to grow, for me to extend, for me to push. Really beautifully put. And who do you want to pass the ball to? I know Mia and Iris K we've not heard from. Who would you like to select?
So let me now turn our attention to Mia. So Mia, the ball is in your realm.
Okay.
Mia Morris, OBE.
It's about bravery, integrity, and honesty, boldness, being your best self. It's as good as it gets.
I love that. I love that. I love it.
And it's a bit like when you're writing, where you start off thinking that you don't know what you're going to write. And someone said to me, it starts with one word, then a sentence, then a paragraph, then you've got a page.
Wonderful. It's beautiful.
So it's having the courage to do that.
Oh, that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. Iris K, courage.
Yeah, pretty much on the same veins. You know, it's for me stepping out in faith, and I've found that having the trust in the universe and encountering that moment where you just are in free fall, then magic happens.
Mm.
And what I found is actually remembering that magic is very important in times when you're anxious or not quite stepping up to your full potential, to just remember those moments and keep reinvigorating that.
I love all of that. You know, Iris, I mean, there's quite a number of lines in that were very, very poetic. And I love that moment where you encounter yourself when you're in free fall. How powerful, because sometimes it's possible. I wonder, I mean, I put it out there, it's a philosophical thing for us to ponder on. It's possible that how we perceive ourselves, or how we've been told, because I think what Dr. Martin said will resonate with many of us, how we've been told that we should be, that identity and the identity that maybe even you and everybody else holds of yourself may not be who you are. So what you encounter when you're in free fall, I love this. I just love this. What you then encounter when you're in free fall, and that's stepping out in faith. Very, very powerful, isn't it? I mean, there's something magical because I can feel that. I can feel that energy. I wonder if in your, Mavelle, I've got a feeling that you've got something to, I'm just about to put people into groups, right? But my instinct was to say, Mavelle's got something that she wants to add. So am I right? Just before I'm gonna send you to breakout groups, something was saying.
I didn't have anything particularly, but I was just thinking, you probably caught me mid-thought. I was just thinking about, so today is the 5th anniversary of my sister's passing. So this morning I got up and I did a meditation around grief. And the first thing it talked about was having the courage to grieve, which I hadn't thought about it that way. And I immediately made the link with this call this afternoon. And I hadn't thought about grief being an act of courage until that was mentioned. And so talking about, someone mentioned getting up every day. And I do remember distinctly, immediately after my sister passed away, I couldn't get up every day. I didn't get up off my couch for 3 months after she died. And so having the courage to do everyday things, even things like grieving, it takes a lot. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that. So what I would add is that it takes courage to recognize when you're being courageous also. Because I think we take so many things for granted. So when you're being courageous, I think you need to recognize that and give yourself credit for it.
It's very, very powerful. I think thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think what you've just shared is profound. It's healing, it's liberating, it's encouraging. And I think that's an act of courage. And I think that so many people listening to this in many ways, what you've said will kind of really, really, really chime. I was going to send you into breakout groups, but someone was saying in my heart that the downside of breakout groups for the audience is that they may not hear even more magic. It'll give them more time with me and less time with yourselves. I wonder if anyone wants to pick up from there, or let's just carry on the flow of the conversation. Sergio, I want to just turn to you again because you kicked off this first round, and yes, thank you so much for your first time here. Can I ask you, what was it that drew you here today? Was it this particular topic? Was it this particular theme? I'm wondering, or if there's anything else you're wanting to say, because I'm wondering, was there even something about the topic that chimed? I'd love to hear more.
I think it was both. The topic was a hook, for sure. But I like the idea of compassion and being able to meet other people and share experiences. And I think at this particular time, at the moment, I have my elbow quite swollen all of a sudden. And it happened after a Zoom conversation when I was talking and expressing things about work. So it's kind of, there's not a logic about the physical pain and inflammation and how that happened very quickly. I searched on the internet on something called biodescodification in Spanish. And it talked about how the body is very intelligent to tell us what's wrong. And I had this issue dealing with a bad employer Very painful issue as a filmmaker. My role is to tell the truth, and I wasn't able to do it with a film that was commissioned by a woman who didn't represent her words. So it was a dissonance between actions and the words. That kept me quite in a very complicated state for the last 6 months, even before COVID. So after I had this event, funny enough, that woman contacted me saying that, are you avoiding me? So that was actually the lesson, and I realized that my silence was a way of speaking, that it was speaking. And now I'm dealing with courage in the sense of position myself and looking about how to finish this working relationship with an agreement. But I can see that lots of things were moving, and my body were telling me, no, don't leave it for later.
So many powerful things there in what you were saying there, Sergio. So there's something about, there's so many things that jump out to me there. What happens when we have the courage? What happens if we don't have the courage? The physiological aspect of courage. And I'm curious about the one thing that I'm curious about at this moment, and I wonder if anyone else wants to pick up on that or any of the other things that Sergio put there, is the thing is, what happens when I'm not courageous? Because sometimes we're so worried about what's going to happen if I am courageous, what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to everyone. But what happens when we're not? Because sometimes I think that I've had certain times, and it's interesting that I know that I can't not but do something. I've got to, and I've got to just act from this particular, it's almost like there's something, if there's a physical thing, that is kind of happening, I've got to do that, because again, there's something right for me, picking up on the thing that Frank said, and picking up on the thing that Danny was saying, was that thing about that, how courage is different to everyone. And I'm picking up on what Alexandra was saying about the small acts of courage. I remember once this may seem as though it's different along a different thread, but I think it links. I was out doing a walk with another coach of mine who does outdoor coaching and takes executives on these hikes and so on. And I said to him throughout the thing, it was in the Lake District, and I'm a city boy, and I'm usually, I'm very rarely in the lakes and stuff like that. But we were having this walk, and it was fantastic. And I said to him, wow, you do all this stuff, and you do all this outdoor stuff, and you're really adventurous. I'm not adventurous. And he turned around to me and he said, Rashid, you're very, he was looking about how I was with my career and so on. But I didn't link that in the same, that what I did to adventure or courage. You know what I mean? There's again this link. So it's interesting, even sometimes that word, and recognizing in ourselves courage, recognizing the times when we've acted with courage. Anyone want to jump in there, or anyone want to share a time that in their life that required courage, and what was the outcome of it? Because there might be something very powerful in that sharing. Dr. Martin, please.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and then Frank, yeah.
Frank, please go ahead before me.
Oh, okay. First, Rash, I'd like to push back on something you literally just said.
Yes.
Because you talked about small acts of courage. I don't actually believe that, because I think it's relative depending on where you're coming from.
Beautiful. So true. So true.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, go on. You were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. I agree with you 100%, isn't it? It's so true. It's so dependent on where you're on, because sometimes the small is the profound, or the small it's so subjective. So true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think going back to the point that Mavel mentioned about being brave, and well, being true to your principles and values, regardless. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add to that.
Magical. Dr. Martin.
Yes, I worked with someone who was not easy to work with. There are some people who operate through tantrum management, and tantrum management usually means you annoy and upset and devalue the people that you're working with, and so the team doesn't work effectively. And that's the way this particular person operated. And everyone has their limit, and I have more patience than I sometimes think that I do have, but I'd reached that point of having really enough. And my personality is one where, as someone who's Pisces, a dear, dear member of my family said to me, Pisces are not really two fishes swimming in opposite directions. You are a dolphin who will take you for a ride and do tricks and show your intelligence and make people happy. And the other direction is the shark. Now, they look the same, but the dolphin is going to make you happy and make you feel great and give you rides and so on. But the shark will, at the very limit, take a leg, you know, and just devour you. And that's you, Martin. So I said, I must be aware of that. In order to deal with this person whose tantrum management was beyond and below professionalism, I decided to write the 10 points of what was unprofessional and conduct deeply unbecoming. And then I emailed the 10 points and said, you know, we're going to have a meeting. These are the things that are deeply problematic, and I would like to talk to you about them. Please decide which one you want to discuss. We will discuss them all, but please decide for yourself which one you want to tackle first, and we'll move through it. And I found that by containing myself, but sharpening my point of confrontation, whereby we're going to deal with all the things that you do that are wrong. And instead of me saying to you, there's this, and there's that, and there's that, and that, I wrote it out and let them see exactly what was wrong and exactly the impact of the conduct unbecoming and professional behavior, so that in advance, before we got to the meeting, you knew these are the issues. Now, we can deal with it in any order you like, but we're going to deal with it. But you knew overall what the matter was. And I found that incredibly liberating in an environment that requires professional conduct, but where you're going to say, I'm not going to accept any more of that. And in this meeting, we are going to move forward or beyond the things that you do that's deeply unbecoming and also distressing for the people that you work with. This was a top manager. And if I would have said nothing and just said, oh, no one ever likes their boss, you have to put up with it, I would have been deeply ashamed of myself. And having the courage to go forth, but also I think courage sometimes requires something else. It may be strategy, it may be diplomacy, it may be whatever it is. But I just decided that to speak the truth also means to inform you about what's what, and give you the opportunity to say what you need.
I like, as I was just listening to you, Dr. Martin, there's something that you were saying at the tail end there that I thought was really an interesting, interesting additional point. That whilst there will be many times that will show up that require courage, and it can be daunting, overwhelming, especially when there's power imbalances and so on. But thinking about what is it that I might need to have as well as the courage. So it's not just necessarily brash courage. That actually let me think strategically. Let me do this. Let me do that. One thing I wondered that I wanted to throw in there is, what is it that you've, again, it comes back to me, what's it that you've gained and what's it that you've lost with courage?
Tie off the point. May I just tie off the point?
Please.
What was extraordinary was that having that meeting and making that person aware of the things that they did, which was so destabilizing to everyone else that I worked with, made them aware of the way in which they operate, which was counterproductive in every way. And from that, we then formed a relationship of respect that was never there in the years before, because you've actually got the nerve. That's such a wonderful word, isn't it? You've got the nerve to actually come to me and say, that's not something that is right. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. You know, the rest of the department have a problem with your behavior.
Right. So I guess with courage can come transformation, right, for ourselves or for others. Anyone else want to come in there? Anyone else want to just share? In which case, if I want to,
I just wanted to kind of pick up on something you said before. You'd asked what happens when we're not courageous, and what dawned on me was kind of answer the question you just asked as well. Is without courage, there is no progress. We are in the position we're in, particularly to those of us who are Black on this call. We're in the position that we're in, being able to kind of go to work and have a voice doing some of the work that we do. Granted, we're not where we should be, but we're able to be where we are because of the courage of those that have gone before us. Rob has a popular saying, you know, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we rest on their courage. So when we're not courageous, we don't make those progresses that can help not only ourselves but for others around us. So excuse my dog, she's barking at the door.
She knows it's nearly dinner time. That's why.
No, someone's at the door outside minding their own business, and she thinks she's a guard dog. She's got a complex. But for the courage of people like, you know, Dr. King, Sojourner Truth, Malcolm X, but for the courage of those people, we wouldn't be making the progress we're making today. And I'll stop there because my dog won't shut up.
Yeah, I think very powerful that link about the courage of others and then our role in being courageous. I think that's very, 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 very powerful. Anyone else want to come in there? Yeah, please, Iris.
I just would like to pick up on the point that it was raised by Dr. Martin on a professional level. I always worked, my whole professional life is as a freelancer or as a, you know, have my own business, or like my mom said, you are an eternal unemployed because, you know, I just have money for the project that I do and then I have to start everything again. When you work as an independent professional, or when you have a company, for example, sometimes courage is about giving time to show up the problems. I can remember a specific situation that I had in my professional life that I was encouraged by my husband to speak up because I live in a different country. It's not like my country. You should speak up because people will support you here. And I spoke up and I just, you know, brought this big fight to my own hands. And actually, people behaved exactly like they behaved in my own country. And nothing changed. And I actually became quite ill with the situation because I said, I can't believe that people know and they are just pretending that this corruption is not happening. And that actually they're just choosing the same ones, you know, doing the situation. It was a situation that my husband said, you know, you have to speak up. It involved race. And my husband said, you know, here is not like your country. And then maybe it was my expectation. Here is not like my country. And then I found out actually it is. So on that situation. And then my learning from that, it was something that I apply today and takes me a lot of courage, is just to be in silence and carry on working and wait for time to show up the problems that I try to show up. Because what I learned is, yeah, the problem is there, but I am not the right spokesperson to highlight the problem because I'm not going to be listened because of bias that I cannot control. And I think that courage sometimes is like Dr. Martin says, is about having the other skills to understand how to deal with the situation.
Really?
And, I confess that I fail a lot on that because I go with my bravery. Oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And then it's just, you know, sometimes it goes wrong.
Iris, there's so many magical things that you were saying there. I love that thing about, because they're all part of it, isn't it? The times where silence can be powerful. There are times when silence can be profound as a weapon. The silence of, am I the best spokesperson? And that thing when we add also being that strategic and also that point we said, yeah, we might be brave, but are we necessarily always going to be able to get the outcome that we're wanting to get? I think things are very, very, very powerful when we consider them in the mix, isn't it? When we're not mindful, what is the outcome here? You know, I often have lots of conversations with people as a coach, asking people before they have any conversation, because my background is also media and PR. Lots of people think they're the courageous. And let's take even in people's lives and their day-to-day lives and their homes, and they can have a conversation with somebody. They want to be brave and have a conversation with somebody. I'm like, why are you having that conversation? What's the outcome that you're wanting? Because sometimes I'm just wanting to vent. I'm just wanting to, you know, it's me. But what's the outcome here? And what's that, I think the thing that Frank pointed us to, what's that kind of greater good? So the courage shouldn't just be about me and what I want. And it ties in love beautifully, actually, also then to Mavel's point about that great, and then that, I guess, responsibility with courage, if I can act with responsibility. Wonderful. Anyone else will come? Rob, you've seen Iris, please. Iris K, please.
Yeah, a little bit of a reverse story. In 1996, I went on a contract to South Africa, and initially I didn't really like it, and so it was just at the end of apartheid, so it was reshaping as a new country right at the beginning. And initially I found it absolutely awful, because I've never seen people being spoken to in the way the white people were talking to the black people and the colored people, and I found it really unnerving. And then so we were offered to stay for 2 years to set up a new company, and I was a bit unsure about that. And then a colleague said to me, well, actually the fact that you dislike it is actually a good thing, because if people like us who don't like this way of dealing with people would come and be there at the beginning of the company, we could actually maybe change that. And it was really interesting, because we recruited a lot of, I hope I don't insulting anybody here, you know, because I made friends either way. Yeah, but we recruited initially a lot of white African people into the company. And that was mainly based on skill set, you know, but then this clash continued. And it was really interesting how, you know, as expats, we just could not see that difference in people, you know, and we just socialized. And I remember we had one contractor, and he was actually an immigrant from South Africa, but he had Indian background. And we were sitting one night and having dinner together in the house, so we shared a company house, you know, and he said, you know, a few years ago, it wouldn't have been possible that people like you and I would sit and have dinner together in a house. And that was actually a really interesting thing, where you do something that's quite natural, but actually sets a sign. And you know, we did actually tackle a lot of behavior in our colleagues. And in some ways, it was nearly a little bit reverse arrogance, because we came as it was a German company with an English headquarter going to South Africa, but in a way it was our culture, you know, and we could say, no, the thing is, if you work for this organization, this is a culture, and this may be South Africa, but you just don't treat people like that.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying here, is because one of the things that jumps out to me now is, and I think it brings it back to where we are right now, is, and I can't remember who spoke to this particular point. I think Mavel may have spoken to this point, but what's the one thing that's been in my mind a lot is, what's the courage that each and every one of us needs to have to show up now, that right now, in the wake of COVID-19, in the wake of the economic and the cultural inequalities, in the wake of all the stuff around Black Lives Matter, in the wake of all of these things where we see so many inequalities, what's the courage that I need to have when I show up in the workplace, wherever I am, you know, each and every one of us. So it's interesting, it would strike me, I don't know if anyone else would agree, that we're at a time in an interesting time where courage, and that courage, maybe with a small, but also it can be a big C, as we know, as we've wrote, is really, really important for us all to, and a few of you have said it, to reflect, to self-reflect. How am I showing up? What about me? What's my role? What's my responsibility? And I think there's something good about that we're all having to really reflect on ourselves and our conduct. I don't know if anyone else wants to just bring anything else in there. Anyone else want to share anything else? Coach.
Rash, I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, please.
I think everything you said is true. I'm talking to a colleague at work at the moment who is literally petrified by the situation. In that because she doesn't feel comfortable having that type of conversation in the workplace. She's quite set in her views and can't see things changing, and therefore doesn't see the point in actually engaging in conversation. I think you highlighted it perfectly. I think for a lot of us, it's going to push our levels of courage to the max to get, one, to negotiate where we are, and to get a tangible outcome from it as well.
Yeah, anyone else want to share this beautiful conversation that we've it's like we've journeyed through so many different things here, and I'm always impressed from these things. One thing our viewers won't know is Rob, we already know about the intellect. I don't know how you managed to do this. Engage in a conversation, listening, and then we should release one day the transcripts of all of Rob's wisdoms going along in the chat box. Anything you're wanting to share with us? I'm going to turn to you then. Anything else you're wanting to share?
I absolutely would love to share what my heart's saying at this point. And in answer to your first point, Rash, I think there's something of an alchemy that takes place when willing hearts and compassion checking in as an exercise enables all of us to hear each other, feel what we're saying. Beyond the 2D technical communication that takes place, it's this wonderful opportunity to hear what each of our hearts are saying, and amongst those wonderful moments of resonance and connectivity, there's also the very polite ways in which you heard it earlier when Brother Frank said he'd like to push back at something you had said, and you responded by saying, that's so true. That's 100% true. It's all of those magical moments where we find between the, you and I, Rash, spoke a couple of weeks back about this position we find ourselves in, oftentimes somewhere between chaos and mayhem. We will occupy a space and try and make sense of that. But I was just listening to some of what was being said there. And I think, bless you, Frank. I think there is so much of our establishments that we make our way through on this conveyor belt of life that says in school we are, it begins in nursery, it begins the moment, our parents let us out of their arms physically and we start beginning our journey in life, whether it be in nursery, in school. If any of us make our way to university, we then go from education into employment. And there is this almost this confinement where you're not encouraged, and certainly I speak of my journey, but you're not encouraged to be all of who you are. You're not encouraged to be truly liberated in who you are. And now we find ourselves engaged in what I refer to as a perfect storm, but we are engaged, aren't we, in 8 minutes and 46 seconds of someone losing their life. We are engaged in the empirically measured disparities for Black, Asian, minority ethnic people, but Black people all over the world are disproportionately impacted by a pandemic that affects all of us. It does affect all of us, but yet we know from the measured disparity, and here we are in lockdown, here we are trapped in this 2D representation, looking at news that's given to us, looking at news that is concentrated and written by whoever it's written by, but being presented to us all. And yet somewhere amongst all of that, we find the courage, we exercise the courage to be all of who we are. What an incredible thing that is. And not that it's down to any one of us, because each of us have made our way here, but you, Rashid, have provided us with an opportunity to come together to give each other a good listening to give each other the opportunity to be all that we are. to take that. You mentioned free fall earlier, and what conjured up in my mind was jumping out of life's plane and taking that risk. And I think courage is the parachute on our backs. I think courage is what gives us that softer landing and gives us an opportunity to live life in a fuller sense thereafter, to make sense of what comes next. I think that's what's so beautiful about these opportunities. So thank you for listening to me.
I love that. You know, the thing that there's a line in that that really, I loved it all, because it could all be in a speech, Rob Neal OBE. That's there, you know, for anyone that doesn't know you, you know, that incredible. But one thing that jumped out to me, when you said to give each other a good listening to, we often talk about giving somebody a good talking to, but how often do we give each other a good listening to? I guess what happens in this space, isn't it? That we all arrive here, we all want to be here, we provide that space where people can listen. And I think that one of the things that happens is that we do become, I want to say something here, and it's going to require care in terms of listen to this with your heart, not the head. It's something I don't say very often. I have a saying that it's not one thing that somebody believes about themselves that is the problem. It's everything they've been led to believe. My point here is that language is taught to us. Through language comes ideas and ideologies and all the rest of it. When we can just meet, when we can show up and hear and meet somebody and see what comes from the content of their heart, then magic is possible. We're able to sing, dance, and the other side of what you began talking about, Rob, is that, you know, when we, from very early on, and we go to schools and this, all the rest of it, from very early on, babies have courage, isn't it? But what happens is, you know, when from crawling around to going first day of in nursery and what have you, but often the courage is knocked out of them.
Yeah.
Physically, emotionally, or spiritually, or all of the above. Yeah. For them to be who it is that they are. Yeah. So I think for all of us to have the courage and to realize it's our responsibility to give people the space to be who they are, but also to realize that who they are in one room might be different to who they are in the next room also, and that's fine too. So I think that there's something very, very powerful here. As we head toward the end of today, each week of these ones, I'm like, oh, is this my favorite week? Oh, has this been my favorite week? I'm really enjoying this juice in today's conversation, isn't there? I'm wondering, I'm loving it, because maybe my hope really is that we'll have some really rich conversations in our workplaces, really rich conversations in our families, really rich conversations in people's relationships. Because so often that I'm wanting things to be my way, isn't it, the way I could, but what does that other person want? What's their journey? I think that's really important.
Rash, can I just dive in there and add that part of the challenge of right now is that many workplaces, many spaces in which people come together on a regular basis, because it doesn't always have to be work, but many of those places are now challenged by the objective to give people a good listening to. You know, it starts with, well, how are you feeling? How are you feeling with all of what's happening? And my experience is, as someone that is receiving invitations to facilitate those conversations, to help and support those discussions, is that some people in positions of quote unquote leadership are just not used to listening. It's just not something they are used to. And they find it almost impossible not to take over, let alone what they're listening to being a cultural challenge. They're just not used to listening. And it goes back to what Daniel Kahneman says in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Sorry, Danny. Sorry, Dr. Martin. I'll park it by saying, in his book, Daniel Kahneman talks about thinking fast and slow. And some of our leaders, they just can't help themselves. They've got to be system one. And they just don't, just take the time, just stop. Just listen to what human beings around you are saying.
Love it. And I can see who had your hand up first, Danny or Dr. Martin? We'll take both comments. Love it.
Martin, I'm happy.
One of the things that I've seen, one of the things that I've seen in business is that very often managers have actually not undertaken any management leadership training. Managers do not know how to manage people. So often they're not people. They're not a people person, and they don't understand how to inspire people, which is one of the reasons why they don't listen. Because for me to manage you, I am going to tell you what you have to do, and then when you follow my instructions or my leadership, then you'll be a good employee. But in order for you to really communicate effectively, not only do you have to listen, but a few weeks ago we had another topic called instinct. You have to know when something's wrong. You can feel it. You know, if you walk into a room and you're going to be fired, believe me, you can feel it. Walk into a room where everyone's pleased with your performance, you can tell because your instincts are alive. So leadership and listening and learning, so often in a corporate environment, they are divorced. They're not actually interconnected. And we so often speak about these things because we're usually on the point where you're going, okay, go on, get to the end. I used to work somewhere where someone would constantly interrupt, and I would then hold up a sheet of paper. I said, you know, knowing you were going to interrupt, I've written this down, so when you finish, I'll go back to it. And that really got the point home. I'm going to tell you what the problem is, whether you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear this thing about listening. And Danny, yeah.
Well, it's really refreshing. This is probably one of my favourite ones we've been on. And with Robert, what you were saying, I wanted to say something. And it's because I have a sense of doing that a lot, where I rush my words and I rush what I'm going to say. It's probably because I've been conditioned in an environment where you don't get to speak. You don't get to actually say what you want to say. So you always have to, I feel like you've got to rush it just because there's going to be someone that's going to butt in and take it away from me. But actually, the skills that I'm learning through just being here on the Compassionate Check-In every week is incredible. I get to be around so many amazing people that have this voice and this compassion to just listen. And I love what you're saying about giving people a good listening to. You know, so many times that as compassionate people that we are, we do that naturally, but they don't listen to us. But sometimes that's what you need, is that sort of have an environment where everyone can listen and actively listen. I think what Rob was touching on there is that you can listen and you butt in, but you're not fully actively listening to what they're saying because you're already preempting what you're going to say before they finish their sentence. And that's really hard to be around people or systems, especially in a workplace. I'm, again, like Iris, I've always worked on my own. I've been in my own space, which is great, but I can imagine in a corporate environment full of hotheads, full of people that just want to get to the top and shoot their head off. It's because they're not just listening, they're not being softer enough, not giving it a nice little padded environment to just be okay with whatever you've got to say. And I'm just thankful and grateful of all your guys' time to be here. And if I come across that I'm rushing and I'm splurging my words, it's only because of my condition and what experiences I've had. But you're teaching me every week to slow things down. And maybe that's my mindfulness this week, thanks to Rob, is just to slow my words down, become a bit more zen, or read that. You've recommended too many books to me now, Rob. I'm going to have a hard time to got the rest of my year planned, I think.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. What you're saying there is very powerful, and I think so many of us can learn that. And Bonti, Kojo, and then I'm going to begin to slowly wrap things up. Kojo, please.
Taking it off from what Rob said and what is it Danny? Danny talked about what he is learning, and want to really lace it to still with courage, and having the courage to know that you matter, and not wanting to be heard, still with listening, but the courage that one develops and the courage in self to know that even though I'm not being heard, I am being heard. To recognize that I don't have to speak to be heard. Right? I don't have to vocalize and say the right things or say something to be heard, but I have the courage to also trust the environment where I'm functioning. And I'm not saying that one would have to also neglect and be irresponsible when things are going wrong. I'm never saying that. What I'm saying is also having the courage to know that I don't have to always speak. I have to have the courage to listen, have the courage to kick back and take it all in and know that I am learning, because it also takes courage to learn. I like what Danny said. He said, I'm learning through these checkings. And that is courage right there for me. That is courage. Is where one can spot and have the courage to say, I'm now going to learn. I'm now being courageous to learn, because I wasn't that of a listening person, but now I'm going to be courageous enough to also practice the art of learning. Rush.
It's very powerful what you're saying there, Coach. It reminds me of, and I wanted to share this story before we begin to wrap up, maybe with the last word from yourselves. One of the most powerful things I saw, it was it's about maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I was running a development session for a staff network. It was a Black and Asian Minority Staff Network conference, and the chief executive of the organization had to come and give a talk. Their staff survey results have been really appalling and so on. And I saw amazing act of leadership and courage. The chief executive walked in and he said, words I'm paraphrasing only slightly, "I'm so sorry, we failed you." He was talking about the staff survey results and the outcomes for BME staff and so on. And he opened up straight away, whereas before there was slightly, you know, Martin was saying you could feel the temperature in the room before people were concerned about this and that and of not being heard. Straight away, everybody in the room was on the same side of the table. His vulnerability, his courage and his vulnerability, they often go hand in hand, actually. His courage and his vulnerability was profound. Straight away, the minds melted, which they always need to do. Never mind. There's a reason when people say never mind, it's misunderstood. Never mind. If people were to really sit with that, never mind, that's a whole thing there. So it's never mind, right? So he showed up with his heart. And everybody's heart in the room melted, and it was transformational, because all of a sudden, everybody was heard. Everyone was honored. He was able to really connect. And the warmth toward him, straight away, it was there. Because people would see how vulnerable, it was wonderful. It was beautiful to see. But it requires that courage to really, the thing that is really in my mind, I may have said to you before, the question for me is always, do we have the room in our heart to have that kind of courage for transformation? Do we have the room? That's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's that test, and it goes to the thing people don't know. Do we have the room in our heart? Often the answer is no, and sometimes it's understandable why, because of people's experiences, isn't it? So I think there's also that courage for us to be courageous to the people who are obstinate, who are ignorant, who don't understand, who don't listen. That requires a lot of extra courage from us. But I think there's a lot of room. Last word to everybody in this room, a last word or a last sentence. Alexandra, I'm going to turn to you first of all. And first of all, thank you so much for the support that you do of these. For people who don't know about Alexandra is such a wonderful, warm-hearted person who's constantly flagging things up to people. You might find this valuable. It's really remarkable, the stuff that you do, Alexandra. So I just wanted to say that before you speak.
Yeah, I think that everything we do has a power, and it can be contagious. Is it compassion? Is it courage? But we have to be aware that we all do it in our own tempo, and we do these things when we are ready, when we kind of healed, when it comes from good space. So like Sergio, I hope your arm will heal properly, because I think people are not courageous or compassionate enough or wise or intuitive when they hurt. And as Danny said, when we feel that we are like embraced, enveloped in something positive, then we can heal, and then we can manifest all this potential that also Dr. Martin talked about. It's otherwise we just live within confinements of our body and our mind, and it hurts, and we can't give how much we can give. And yes, I really think that courage for me is still small, big acts, just being there for people, encouraging myself, taking time also as well here. It's very unusual, Danny, for me to speak. I also have to learn that I'm giving this space to talk about myself, and I don't really find it very easy for me to talk, but I take it, it's courageous for me because it's not really comfortable at all. So I congratulate myself every time that I join, and I celebrate it, and I thank you all for.
Yeah, when we thank you for speaking, because whenever you speak, you bring magic with it. Dr. Martin, just a closing word from yourself.
If you are able to show yourself some kindness in the midst of everything that's awful that's going on, and you're able to remind yourself that acts of kindness that you do for other people, they will always come back to you. They will always come back to you, and they'll make you feel wonderful. They really, really do. And then you'll remember what courage is. Acts of kindness are, I think, a very profound type of courage that will remind you of your humanity, and it will bring people to you.
Wonderful. Iris G. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Martin. That's beautiful. Oh, you just need to, yeah.
I don't know if I have anything else to say. I am too curious to understand why Rob made the connection of the imposter syndrome here, and then I've been going over that, frying an egg in my head. So, no, I think that I don't have anything else to add into the discussion. Really.
But I just want to say to you, thank you for being that person who's courageous, because we need those people who, I've been there when I can remember as a kid, there was a kid and he was just courageous enough to be himself. I'm like, wow. So we see those people who are courageous and we thank them for their acts of courage. So, Mia Morris.
Just one thing that I could say. It's just because the Iris K touched in one point. In my country, actually people don't, well, they say that I talk too much, but they do not use the sort of thing that I hear here. A lot of people all the time tell me that I look like an angry woman, and then I am 1 meter 50 centimeters, and then they always bring my height into it, or then my race. They say, well, is the African on you? And then I say, it's not, actually it's the indigenous. I suffered more as an indigenous than as an African, because, it's just people that know about my nose and all that, because in my country it's so mixed. So that's this thing about every time that you try to be courageous, someone tell you that you are angry, and then I say, well, no, actually I'm not an angry person.
Good point.
Perhaps courage for me, sometimes I just think, well, sometimes it's better just to let it go, because people can understand, other cultures understand it completely different sometimes.
I'd just like to say, Iris, that you're hearing their denial. People shut down what you're saying to them when they really do feel it. And what's the easiest strategy is to deny the words that you've said, and to disavow all that you're about, and then they feel so much better. And of course, then you really have an awful lot to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes what people
Can I
see.
say something?
Yeah, Mia. Yeah, because I was just coming to you next for your closing word. Please, Mia.
I've got a quote. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. That's from Aristotle.
Yeah, love it, Mia. Danny, your closing words.
I think I'm just going to echo again. I wrote it down. I always write lots down from these sessions, but it's what Rob said, and it's give people a good listening to is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, wonderful. Rob, Neil, OBE, your closing words. I need to be put on the retainer, by the way. I need to be put on the retainer because I need to do a count of all the 9 times I've said OBE in all of these things.
Rash, I did tell you what my daughter said it stands for, didn't I?
What's that?
OBE, what it stands for.
Oh, you have told me, but I've forgotten it. Go on.
My daughter, well, typically people say it stands for other buggers' efforts, and it's true, it's on other buggers' efforts. But the OBE, my daughter says, Dad, it stands, some people say it's Order of the British Empire. It's not that at all. It stands for obviously black every day. That's my dad.
Love it.
I love that. No, my thoughts are just prompted by my sister Iris asking after the connection that I had made between courage and imposter syndrome. I think it's born out of my current interpretation that many of the establishments we make our way through, whether they be nursery, school, university, places of work, are ways of confining what we are fully capable of. It's often, school can often appear a form of imprisonment for some of our young people seeking to find their way, seeking to spread their wings. And so for me, when we exercise, give exercise to our courage, use our courage to exercise our faith, what we are doing is building muscles around our authentic self. And so the absence of courage allows the back door to fly open, and that's where imposter syndrome enters. And it's like it creeps up behind us and says, you can't do that. You're not fully capable. Who do you think you are? Get back in line. Just behave yourself. Just be who we want you to be. And no more. Our deepest fear is that we are capable beyond measure. And we're going to be our beautiful self. And we're going to be all that we can be. Because I love what Mia just shared from Aristotle, that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. I love that. Thank you, Mia. Thank you.
Sergio, wonderful, Rob. Thank you so much. And Sergio, first of all, thank you for being here for the first time. Hopefully you're going to be here, same place next week or whenever you can. But Sergio, closing words from you from today's discussion.
I was reflecting a bit about the energy qualities of courage. And I was thinking about the feminine mother courage figure, very visible in the Italian films in the 40s after war. And that's more inner, you carry on with life, you don't publicize to the whole world. And the idea of courage as a male energy, more like towards a warrior and a hero. I have to admit that I like the idea of combining the two for a good sense of purpose. In my life, the elbows is nothing. I just came out from beating cancer. And one of the literature, when people refer that you're a hero, rather than acknowledging you're a courageous person, that annoys me in a way, this idea of a fighter. But there's something about courage which is actually systemic change. So one of my missions in life now is how to bring empathy in care.
Hello.
And that's not by talking in theory. Actually, the people who are supporting me are the Macmillan nurses, because I did a workshop in January and to all the volunteers, and I find out how difficult, they said empathy was the most difficult thing to do. It was draining energy. So the supervisor was really shocked about how people who are dealing with cancer patients cannot embed empathy. So my courage,
Quick question, Sergio. What you're saying here is powerful and profound. Are you making a film around this stuff? About empathy and so on and care? Because if you're not, you must, and we must talk about it. Because I think this is very important.
I want to set up, I launched just a basic, I call it Empathy in Care for Cancer Care, a network, to include doctors and nurses who have cancer. All of a sudden, when they become patients, they are on the other side. And it's very, for them to have the courage as a professional to acknowledge how you feel as a patient. That for me is massive. But I've been banging doors, even the Patients Association, and the courage that I'm driving me is not because I'm right ethically, it's because there's a need. I was interviewing a stage 4 metastatic cancer patient who came to my workshops, and she said, no, when someone comes to her with a face of pity, that's not empathy. She said, I prefer all the facts in an SMS rather than a professional telling me how sorry, because then you feel sorry for the other person and you turn the other way around. So there's a scope, and I hope I make a film, but most important to start making change. So my final conclusion is that courage, if it's not accompanied by systemic change at a bigger scale, it's not just personal, but of course you start from the person. That's why I started, being encouraged to be yourself, but looking at the common good. How can you encourage other people and make systemic changes in systems? That's it.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Kojo.
I've got nothing to say. I've got nothing to say. I want to thank you guys for the knowledge, the content, and above all, the authenticity that shines through the conversation. And I want to thank you for talking courage and me learning to be more courageous. I've got nothing else to say. I've said what I have to say. Thank you.
I'm also so glad I reminded you to come along here. Now, I'm hoping you're going to be sharing your heart and your wisdom whenever you can at 12.
One of these days.
And maybe we can just broadcast. We can just broadcast it on, on Fantastic. Isn't it?
We would have to do that, Rash. We would have to do that. Thank you, sir.
Iris Kane, your closing words.
Yeah, it's interesting how this conversation went to different races, cultures, and differences, and it made me reflect on self-awareness. And in a way, we sometimes, I think, just take it for granted that we find ourselves in social interactions and just deal with it. And I found there are sometimes really magical moments when people just step back and actually have that courage to be honest and open, also that self-awareness. So, a couple of years ago, I left my key inside the house and I had to go to a neighbor, and it's two guys, and they're very quiet. And so I shared that with them until my door was, back open, etc. But they told me they got married. And it was really nice because I was stuck in their house. They showed me their pictures and everything else. And we started to talk about how hard it is for them to go to some places in Europe on holidays, and, how it's difficult here. And, and I had similar conversations, as I said, when I was in South Africa, or even in companies where I worked, where we were thrown together as a mix of different cultures. And in some ways, I think quite often we're thrown together in a context where we just get on with life. And there are very few spaces to actually find that quiet place to have that honesty and say, so in my world, in my culture, this is how that makes me feel. And you can question that, whether that is right or wrong, or maybe you never thought about it. But there are actually very few opportunities to share that understanding instead of just being thrown in a pot and function together for a specific outcome.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Frank Monroe, your closing words, please, my friend.
Right. What struck me today is the significance of empathy and courage, and how that helps to define you as a person and your values.
It's very powerful. And I like the fact that you brought the empathy and courage, because it's almost as though courage is, it's like Sergio said about courage has one energy, that there's that energy, the male energy of being brave and so on. But then there's the female energy, that empathy that can soothe and soften and protect. It's a bit like what Dr. Martin was saying, that when we show up with heart, then actually there are blessings, there are gifts that emerge. Maya, your closing words, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say I picked up on the word heart most of all in the latter half of the conversations, and I've been reflecting on that a bit. And I was just thinking as well about the word courage and the origins of the word courage. And within that, I think core comes from Latin for heart, and coeur is the French for heart. So to me, I think everything that we said about doing things from the heart and the authenticity that comes from that is where I'm sitting. And I'm thinking in terms of courage and in terms of when we do things wholeheartedly versus half-heartedly, and also in terms of when I think of the heart and I think of people or myself, and when the heart is full, I think that is when you are at your most courageous, when you feel like you have a full heart and you can share that with others.
Wonderfully, wonderfully put. I'm going to begin to bring this to a close. And I'd love to, with all of your permission, take a picture of your wonderful selves. In which case, if you are happy, Kojo, can you turn on your camera? It would be lovely to take a picture of yourself as well. And as I'm doing this, and as he's turning on his camera, I just want to say, I like that last thing you said, Naya, because it reminds me of when I wrote the book Soul Trader, which has got a chapter on courage and a chapter on compassion. I reflected afterward that I think that for me, courage and compassion, and of course this compassion check-in, are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes it's a matter for courage. Sometimes it's a matter for compassion. But I've got a quote, I think I've probably shared it before. Compassion is even more powerful than courage. Sure, with courage you can conquer the world, but only with compassion can you heal and build it. So sure, with courage you can conquer the world, but the courage, the compassion is necessary if we're wanting to build, if we're wanting to heal. And so thank you all for taking us on this journey today where we've talked about courage. Sure, it's important for us to have that, but also back to compassion. So I'm going to invite you to smile. Kojo, can you put on your camera, please? It'd be lovely to include you in this photograph of you amazing people. He might have gone off for lunch now. You know, he's probably doing something on radio. He probably can't hear me. He's probably taking himself off the call. But wow, how amazing, how wonderful. Just next, sorry?
Did you take it?
Oh, do you want us to be smiling? Okay, smile. So sorry, smile.
No, it's just that my left-hand side is slightly better than my right-hand side. I just want
like Mariah then, and whatever side is the best side. But can I just say, amazing, thank you so much. Next week's topic, at one point I was always tempted to make it Courage Part 2, but I think we've got there. Any suggestions for topics? Or shall I just sit with it?
Rashid, can I just say my final word on the subject of courage?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
I have to dash away to the repair person who was here, blah, blah.
Yeah, sure, please.
And to me, courage means you must believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself, because if you do, so many things become possible. But if you don't, there's an awful lot that will go missing, and there's an awful lot that's lacking. So to me, courage is believe in yourself.
Wonderful. I wonder if next week, I wonder if, what a word that you just said, I wonder if we should tackle the topic of belief. It's okay. What do you think? That'll be interesting. Should we go there? Should we go there? Next week, belief. Okay. All right then. See you all next week. Have a wonderful week. Take good care. All right then. Lots of love. All right then. So we're going to be courageous next week. We're going to be courageous because we're doing good. Take good care, everybody. See ya.
See ya.
See you. Everyone's going. Everyone's still hang up phone. Brilliant. Excellent stuff. Excellent. Here are the musical people. All the musical people are still on the call.
I thought Dr. Martin was going to play us out with something. He's got me.
I'll play you out with something. I'll play you out with something.
Dr. Martin, the heavens have just opened up here in Harrow. It's pouring with rain. But
it was also about 5 minutes ago in London. I'm here in Hackney.
Okay, I think it's moving this way then, because it's literally pouring down and it's very dark. But I'm still going to keep playing Hotter Than July, Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Gentlemen, have a good week.
And you.
And why don't you, Rob, suggest an album of the week to me or for me?
Okay. You want me to do that now?
When you have time.
I will. I will message you back as soon as it pops into my heart.
Perfect.
All right then, my friends.
Rush. Take care.
Take good care. All right then. Right. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I've only just stopped recording now. So.